Ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure and an honor for me to introduce to you one of our participants this week, Carsten Paludan-Müller. Since 2003, he has served as General Director of the Norwegian Institute for Cultural Heritage Research. He's an archaeologist, educated in Copenhagen and Cambridge. His main research interests are cultural heritage and conflict reconciliation. He's working with the Council of Europe as well as the World Bank, and beforehand he had several leading positions in the Danish Cultural Heritage Administration. The topic that he has chosen is the following: Europe, a constrained and fragmented space on the edge of the continental landmasses. Crossroad, battlefield, and melting pot. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a very, very warm welcome for Carsten Paludan-Müller. Thank you.
Okay. What I'm going to present you with here comes out of something I did for the Council of Europe a couple of years ago. They were issuing a book, going to publish a book about cultural heritage and beyond. The idea was to try to explore how does cultural heritage influence on the way Europeans think of themselves and think of the others. So from that point of view, I wrote a paper, and the title is the one you see here. In order to define Europe, you sometimes should try to take a different perspective, a perspective from outside. This is not a mistake. This is, in fact, me Googling a couple of years ago for another map of Europe, a map which I found. The map which I found was Chinese, and I decided just to help you further, getting a new perspective to turn it upside down. And the point of this map, of course, in my showing it, is that there you can see that Europe, first of all, is a very tiny space. It is very fragmented, and it's very close to some very big land masses. And that's important. Space, geography is important to understand history and culture. Usually, Europe sort of thinks, we usually think that we have something very special with us. We have the whole history of the agricultural development from way back with the olive and the wheat and the wine growing, but it all came from elsewhere. It came from the Near East, from the Zagros Mountains, from the Black Sea region, and so on. And it became sort of the backbone of European cultural development for the first many thousand years, but it came from elsewhere. Around 1500 after Christ, we saw a new development with a heavy technology which made it possible to plow the waterlogged heavy clay soils in the northern part of Europe. That innovation was not made in Europe, that came from China, where it had been used since 600 before Christ. So that's another example of Europe benefiting from technological development from elsewhere. In fact, European special sort of development within agriculture didn't come until around 1800 AD, where there was made a sort of a rationalization of the way farms were run. Village communities were broken up into individually held farms, and it all boosted agriculture production and laid the foundation later on for the development of an industrial agriculture production where machinery produced in the towns were traded for livestock animals which were brought to the town, slaughtered there, processed into refined foods and so on and so forth. That was the real boost to a European economy that came there. And with it, of course, also came the city. The city has never been able to feed itself. It is always fed on the countryside and the agricultural production. But one thing which is important about the cities is that they live from trade and manufacture, and that trade and manufacture gives them the ability to collect from elsewhere the food that they consume. So trading is important, and absorbing people who come from the countryside or from other parts of the world is important. And the most prosperous of the European cities have always been those that have been able to absorb many different identities and integrate them into a common life of some sort. Rome became a city of 1 million people already 2,000 years ago. Toledo in Spain became one of these hubs where different cultures met. We have the Jewish culture, we have the Muslim culture, we have the Christian culture cohabitating. The picture which you see, the green one, is by a painter called El Greco, who was born on Crete and brought with him the tradition of Byzantine iconic paintings and transformed European painting by doing that, by bringing in something which was alien by then to European ways of conceiving painting. He actually introduced quite a new tradition in European painting. Venice became one of the most prosperous European cities by trading with the Eastern Mediterranean and by trading with first the Byzantine Empire and then the Ottoman Empire. And you can see it in the architecture of Venice. It's a syncretic architecture which contains a lot of references to the architecture, for instance, of the Ottoman Empire. London, the first sort of one of the biggest cities in Europe, has always been a multicultural city. It is so today, it has been so in the past. And Istanbul, imperial capital for 1,700 years, 2 different empires had their capital there, and it has always been a place where people from all over the world came to live together. Some years ago I read an interview with a Greek newspaper editor. He was an editor of a Greek newspaper in Istanbul. After there'd been some troubles back in the 50s, he fled to Athens, but then he went back to Istanbul, and he was asked why. He said, well, I can't live in a provincial town, I have to live in a metropole. So he went back and resettled in Istanbul. So, other symbols in the European cultural heritage are symbols that show us that we are connected with the wider world. The road, Via Appia Antica outside of Rome, is one example. The Harp of Amsterdam, which brought together people and goods from all over the world, is another example. So, we also have negative heritage, evidently, and we should not forget that. The Serbian ambassador told us earlier today about the importance of remembering what has happened in history, also when it's unpleasant memories. The fortresses were made to keep people away, to reinforce the borders, to impede people from interacting, or to establish your rule over conquered land. The walls, like here the Berlin Wall, were made to arrest people from going elsewhere where they wanted to go. These are memories, that's a heritage we must not forget. We should keep remembering it. And of course we have places of pride and shame, other places like the battlefields of the First World War, which have gone through a very specific sort of change of meaning. First, Verdun was a symbol of French heroic suffering in the fight against the enemy, the Germans. Then it became a symbol of a European tragedy, and of late it has become a symbol of European reconciliation. I think you all remember the picture of François Mitterrand and Helmut Kohl holding hands in front of the battlefield of Verdun. Many people have laughed at it because they thought this is populistic, but I think it's an important image which stays with us. Sorry. And this one, another place of pride and, of shame and suffering, Arbeit macht frei, which is that's Theresienstadt in the Czech Republic, one of those concentration camps. And that's also an example of what history does to us. Europe's great shame is the atrocities committed against the Jews. So a recompensation would have been sort of appropriate. But the price for the recompensation was paid not by Europeans, but by someone who is suffering today from other wars that are being put up in Palestine today. Cultural heritage in areas of conflict, they are often part of the conflict theme. We see targeted destruction of cultural heritage, or cultural cleansing, we could call it. It's an important feature of contemporary warfare. We've seen it in the Balkans. It's a means to rewrite history by denying someone's right to history in a place. You write them out of the script, so to speak, out of the landscape. And afterwards, you actually exclude people themselves from the landscape. So the eventual reconstruction after the disaster, after the destruction, the reconstruction of cultural heritage is something which we must handle with care. We must be aware of the significance, the meaning of those objects that we reconstruct. Take, for instance, the Mostar Bridge. The picture on top shows the bridge at the moment of its destruction. And the picture below shows the bridge as it looks today, after having been reconstructed. It's a beautiful place, again. But the great problem here is that the idea of reconstruction was not a local idea. It was the international community that descended upon Mostar and said, you're going to have this bridge back because what's more wonderful than building bridges between people? And that's a nice symbol. But the problem is that not everybody was included in that process. It became something which was that the Bosniaki part of the conflict liked and wanted, but the Croat part felt excluded by it. So they retaliated, so to speak, on the symbolic dimension by building extra high new belfry on their church when they reconstructed it, 3 times as high as it used to be before, and putting up white crosses on the mountain ridges surrounding Mostar. So now the battle goes on a symbolic level with building symbols. So one has to be very careful to see what sorts of statements do you want to make when you reconstruct cultural heritage after conflict. Could you do it in a balanced way that includes everyone? That would be good. So these places of worship are very important. In fact, religious buildings do not necessarily need to be reconstructed for their religious meaning. They can be just something which we want to be able to look at because it used to be there. It's part of what we consider our identity, not for religious reasons, but because it used to be there. The picture here shows that's two shots of Die Frauenkirche, the Church of the Lady in Dresden, Germany. The first one is a ruin, as it was kept for many years by the German Democratic Republic, East Germany, so-called. They wanted to keep it, as they said, as evidence for the crimes committed by the Anglo-American air gangsters against the German population. So that was one way of presenting that piece of cultural heritage. After the unification of Germany, it was decided this should become a symbol of peace and reconciliation. So the first thing was that Dresden and Coventry became twin cities. Coventry was one of the English cities which was completely destroyed by Luftwaffe during the war. So these two had to get together. Then the international community came together to finance the reconstruction of the Frauenkirche. And then when they decided that the church should have its golden cross back, they found out there was a goldsmith in Coventry who could do this job. He did it, and the father of the goldsmith was a bomber, and he was one of the bombers who actually flattened Dresden. So there you have a circle of symbols that come together in a way that creates a very strong symbol of reconciliation. So I think that's very important to understand. Other places of worship and learning and ideology can be found many places, also in this region. The first picture is from a church, an Armenian church, and the second is from the mosque of the Blue Mosque in Istanbul. You can see that both of them are old, elderly men like me, who are sort of humble in their moment of reflection, and you may wonder how much is actually separating them when it comes to that. History is important, as the Serb ambassador told us. This monument here is from a tiny village outside of Timișoara in Romania. It's a monument for the victims, the soldiers that fell under the First World War. And Europe is filled with those monuments. This one is particular because when you walk around the four sides of the obelisk and read the text, what you see is one German text, one Serb text, one Romanian text, one Hungarian text. From the same village, 4 different nations fought in the same army on the same side in the same war and died. And that's the reason why this is important here in our context is that the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, and that was where this city belonged then, was one of the multi-ethnic empires that were destroyed during the First World War, like the Ottoman Empire. If this is a map which shows Europe as it was perceived by German negotiators in the preparation for the Versailles peace agreement. You don't have to be very you don't have to hang yourself up in on how the colors are distributed. But the point, sorry, I just need some water. The point is that the distribution of color is supposed to indicate ethnic identities. And what you see is, in the western half of the map, there are very clear distributions of colors. They're not very sort of mixed. When you cross sort of Germany and move into the eastern part of Central Europe, and further also to the southeast, you see a much more murky pattern. This is a place of the multi-ethnic empires. And the color distribution, the exact distribution may not be correct. I mean, it was made for negotiations about where borders should be in the future. The English and the French produced maps along the same sort of rationale, but with different color distributions. So what we should be aware of is that there are two ways of coping with identities until the First World War in Europe and the wider region around the Mediterranean. In the West, there's been these old nation states which were not always homogeneous. There's been a lot of killing going on, a lot of ethnic cleansing. Think of the Spanish who evicted the Jews, and they were received by the Ottoman Empire. The Russian Tsarist Empire was a multi-ethnic empire. The Byzantine Ottoman Empire was the Persian Empire, the Holy Roman and the Habsburgian Empire. They were all multi-ethnic. And if we do not understand that this region, which is sort of to the east and south of the West, has for a long time been in a multi-ethnic state construction, if we do not understand that, we do not understand the patterns of culture and conflict and connections that we have today. So, with this map, I just want to show you how close we are. Upside down is always good. This is illustrating the area of the Ottoman Empire, and try to ponder upon how near we are to one another. The Mediterranean is really not something which separates us, it's something which unites us. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Carsten, for an excellent presentation. Any comments or questions? Yes, okay, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Max. I'm a bachelor student of political science from Münster University and currently studying in Istanbul. Congratulations to this very, very interesting presentation. You showed a lot of effort in illustrating many details which could have gone without notice, maybe in some assessments of the European history. But my question would be, and you've presented quite well the actuality or the necessity to evaluate a common history or an individual history. But I would ask you how or where could be the limits of these self-reflective capacities and their influence towards international politics without being prone or vulnerable to maybe national narratives which may have their tendencies and multicultural interpretations. I hope you get my point.
Are you? I'm not quite sure, but your question is that should we be careful not to be caught up in history and sort of continuing the patterns of thinking of the past, or what's your?
My question is to which extent this, especially by the leaders of politics or diplomats, can have these self-reflective capacities to really ensure the equal exchange of ideas across borders of cultural history and social systems.
I think it must start with a recognition of the necessity of understanding the other side, and that's a classical principle in French diplomacy, for instance, as it was founded back in the 17th century. You need to understand the background and the platform of your adversary, even if you sort of don't want him to have his way. If you do not understand where he comes from, then you cannot have a fruitful negotiation. So you must understand the interest and the background, and I think that's basic for diplomacy, and I mean that's what this seminar is about. So I think that many of the politicians today are curious and are interested in actually understanding the historical and cultural roots of the other. I think so. It's more a question about the public rhetoric, and I think that's crucial.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Is there a final question or a comment? If not, then let's take this opportunity to express our sincere gratitude to Mr. Carsten Paludan-Müller. Thank you very much.
Thank you.